On the vibrant and busy platform of Union Central Station, an African-American woman was stopped by two officers who claimed that her behavior aroused suspicion. However, what appeared to be a standard check soon turned into an unforgettable scene. The officers had no idea that their perceptions would be completely challenged when the contents of the woman's purse revealed a high-level identification and a loaded Glock. What happened next? Stay until the end to discover a story of prejudice, consequences, and redemption. In the meantime, tell us where you're watching from. Let's begin. It was the classic rush hour at Union Central. The vast main hall buzzed with activity as crowds moved in all directions, under the immense arched ceiling that seemed to be the silent conductor of this orchestra of chaos. The air echoed with the hurried footsteps, choppy announcements, and the roar of trains. It carried with it a mixture of metal, brown asphalt, and the distant trail of engine smoke. Amidst the rush of commuters, Liana Monroe stood out. Although it was clearly not her intention, there was something magnetic about her. There was an elegance to her demeanor. At 36 years of age, Liana radiated a solitary calmness that commanded attention without asking for it. Dressed in an impeccable black skirt suit, in a fitted blazer, with a leather handbag that reflected professionalism and style, her every step, marked by the rhythmic sound of her heels, seemed to resonate as a subtle statement of her presence. Her curly hair framed a face marked by serenity, and her observant eyes left no detail unscrutinized. She walked along the platform like an eagle scanning her surroundings, though not everyone saw her the same way. Two uniformed officers stepped out of the crowd, fixing their attention on Liana. Agent Matthew, a tall, broad-shouldered man, advanced toward her with an air of overconfidence, almost defiantly. At his side was Agent Harris, a noticeably younger agent who followed his partner's lead. Although his nervousness was evident in how he repeatedly adjusted his belt, he remained silent. "Excuse me, miss," said Matthew, blocking Liana's path with a calculated smile that exuded superiority. His tone, although polite in appearance, was laden with condescension and overconfidence. Liana stopped, raising an eyebrow with a calmness that belied the latent danger she detected in the air. Her gaze was coldly appraising. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked, her voice firm, almost cutting. "Just a routine check," replied Matthew, his smile widening with an air of false security. "You match the description of someone we are looking for. Could you show me some identification?" Liana didn't respond immediately. Her eyes hardened, studying the officer with an intensity that could have frozen the air around him. "What kind of description?" she asked at last, each word carefully calculated, charged with an inquisitive authority. Matthew tilted his head slightly forward, trying to assert his presence like a predator stalking its prey. "We'll discover it shortly. Please come with us to the side," he ordered, pointing to a nearby wall with a firm, rehearsed movement. A slight sigh escaped Liana, her patience on the edge, but her posture remained unperturbed. Without taking her eyes off him, she slid her hand into her purse with controlled movements. Every gesture was deliberate as she pulled out her ID. The metallic sheen of the badge caught the officer's attention for a moment before he picked it up, his expression changing. "Police government agent, eh?" muttered Matthew, examining the badge with a mix of skepticism and poorly disguised disgust. His words, impregnated with distrust, seemed to look for a flaw in the document's perfection. Liana crossed her arms slowly, her gaze fixed like a dagger on Matthew. "I am working on an official assignment," she replied, her voice so serene it could have been ice. "Does that constitute a problem?" Harris, who had until then remained on the sidelines, shifted uneasily. His discomfort was palpable, almost contagious, and his eyes searched Matthew's as if trying to read his thoughts. "Perhaps we should report this," he suggested, his voice brittle like a child looking for quiet permission. Matthew waved his hand dismissively. "We don't need to do that," he said, though his attention never wavered from Liana. With a smirk, he added, "What's in her purse that we should know before we check?" Liana slowly exhaled, her lips barely breaking into a hint of a smile. Although her expression was still one of pure warning, it was not in her best interest to do so. "It's not in your best interest to do so," she said, each word sharp as a scalpel. Matthew interpreted her calmness as a sign of vulnerability, and his smile turned into a grimace of anticipated victory. "Is that so?" he replied, his voice laden with mockery. Without a second thought, he took Liana's purse and opened it with a swift, sure movement. Time seemed to stop as his fingers brushed against the shiny plate inside the bag. Next to the gleaming badge, a matte black pistol rested with the same imposing authority as the woman in front of him. Matthew's face lost all color, and his false security crumbled like a castle of cards. Harris, behind him, took a step back. Bewilderment painted on his face. "Harris!" Matthew muttered, his voice a whisper filled with alarm and repressed fear. Liana reached out slowly, retrieving her purse with movements so controlled that they seemed a veiled threat. Her eyes, now colder than ever, pierced Matthew like blades as she spoke in a firm, deadly voice. "Now tell me, exactly at what point did it become protocol to harass a federal agent on this station?" Matthew stammered, unable to hold her gaze. "We thought you might be a threat," he said, his tongue tangled in a knot of panic. Liana dropped the word with irony that could have crushed mountains. "Tell me, officer, in what world does a woman in a skirt and heels become a threat? Or is it that you assumed you could intimidate me because you thought I wouldn't do anything?" The murmur of nearby passengers began to fill the air. Some had stopped, while others raised their phones to record the scene. The tide of public opinion was turning against the officers, and Matthew knew it. His confidence was completely gone. Without hesitation, Liana pulled out her phone, turned on the recording, and lifted the device in one slow, deliberate motion. "Names and badge numbers right now," demanded her voice, so firm it echoed across the platform like a sentence. Harris was the first to speak. "Harris, badge number 15,347, he murmured, looking down at the ground. Liana turned the camera towards Matthew, whose voice was barely a trickle as he uttered, "Matthew, badge number 22,984, his tone laden with defeat. She slowly lowered the phone, her gaze charged with a power that no longer needed words. "He likes to touch women's belongings during their routine check, huh?" she asked, each word dripping with sarcasm. "I wonder how he will explain this to his superiors the next morning." The video went viral, and media headlines highlighted the incident as a clear example of abuse of power and discrimination. The police immediately announced an internal investigation into the two officers involved, but Liana did not stop there. Using her resources as a federal agent, she requested a meeting with the chief of the local police. At that meeting, she presented not only her case, but also reports of other similar incidents she had compiled with the help of her agency. "This is not just for me," she said firmly. "It is for all the people who have been victims of this type of abuse." Officer Matthew was suspended, and Harris was formally reprimanded. In private, Harris sought out Liana to apologize. "I should have spoken up earlier," he admitted, visibly remorseful. Liana listened attentively, but her posture did not change. "This is not about apologies," she replied. "It's about making things right and making sure that no one else goes through this." Finally, Liana returned to Union Central, ready to board her train. This time, no one dared to interrupt her. As she settled into her seat, she received a text message from her superior. "Excellent job. Changes in progress." A smile came across her face. She knew she had turned an act of injustice into a catalyst for change. It is important for each of us to reflect on our experiences and how we can contribute to a more just world. If you have ever experienced discrimination or witnessed unfair treatment, you can inspire others to stand up to injustice. Share your experience in the comments, and remember to subscribe for more stories that motivate us to make positive change. Together, we can create an environment of respect and understanding for everyone.